Hi, you're with Christine and Ask Your Angels. Joining me this evening is Dr. John Stewart, specializing in medical sciences, neurophysiology, electrical engineering, complementary and alternative medicine, natural medicine. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, Dr. John. This is such an honor.
Well, it is for me too, and an opportunity to share the knowledge that I've been studying all these years, and to make it easier for others, to guide them in a path. I am primarily a teacher as well as a scientist, and my goal has been to bring together science and spirituality, physics and metaphysics, and to see where conventional science can help us determine some of the secrets of metaphysics. Now, in metaphysics, what is metaphysics? Is areas of science where we are not able to do repetitive studies. Often they're anecdotal, which means that they're just a bunch of stories. Like if a group of people saw UFOs, but if enough people saw them and they all described the same thing, that would build up a body of evidence that would be on the probability would be more likely to be believable if 1,000 people independently saw the same thing. Now that, although it's anecdotal, it's still science because it's corroborated, and it's not just one person's impression or perception.
I'm going to go way off topic just based on what you just said. That being said, do you think the Loch Ness Monster is real?
Well, then again, I'd like to believe so, because I'm from Scotland, and I used to go up to Loch Lomond and Loch Ness when I was a student at Glasgow University doing medical sciences. But we need a certain minimal number of corroborative reports that say a similar thing for there to be on the preponderance of probability, like they have in the civil courts. The civil standard is a preponderance of probability, and with the Loch Ness Monster, that's not there yet, even though they've spent millions of pounds and dollars to try to capture and get some evidence. The other level of proof is where it's undeniable, the proof is evident. So there are two levels or more of proof based on probabilities. Now, with regard to when you bring up anomalies like that, what about crop circles and UFOs and extraterrestrials? We're going to cover that tonight because they're all part of the menu for metaphysics and spirituality.
Mm-hmm. We have a lot to cover. I was going to actually mention, this is such a wonderful opportunity having Dr. John Stewart here, that and he's brought so much to show and share with you, that I'm going to ask something out of the norm. If you can actually get a piece of paper and a pen together, and you're going to want to write stuff down, I'm pretty sure. So anyway, tonight we're going to cover reincarnation, karma, indigo and crystal children, quantum physics, parallel universes, sacred geometry, origins of life, evolution, ordered influences in the universe, and so much more. So as you can see, we have a lot to cover. So it's very exciting. I did want to talk a little bit about reincarnation, just to kind of flow from last week and to get a feel for, I'm going to interrupt myself. Which camera should I be staring at here? Oh, perfect. Okay. So anyway, so yes, in a continuum from last week's show when we had Deborah Sky King on, we were talking about reincarnation, so I know we had a lot of questions that were still unanswered. Webster's defines the soul as an entry without material reality, regarded as the spiritual part of a person. So, Dr. John, what's your theory as what does a soul look like?
Well, the soul is composed of energy. But then we really don't know what energy is. If you ask a physicist what is energy, they can't explain it, because energy has many, many different manifestations. There's sound energy, heat energy, light energy, and then there's, in these higher dimensions, there is soul or spiritual or metaphysical energies, and it seems that they fall into hierarchies. And from from my reading and understanding and my work in natural clinical sciences, a lot of it is to do with frequency. Frequency is very important, and it's one of the most important things I want to get across to people, is that over and over again we are told how we have to raise our vibrational frequency. You and I talked about the ninth insight of the Celestine Prophecy. That was a book that influenced me, many years ago, and I was impressed by a lot of these insights. The number 9 was the formation of conscious groups to jointly raise our vibrational frequency. So this is one of the great priorities for us humans and humanoids on this planet. We have to raise our vibrational frequency in all of the ways that have been given, using all the gifts of nature that have been given to, including music, dance, aroma, flowers, you name it. There are many, many gifts that are given to us to raise our vibrational frequency, and light turns out to be one of the most important vehicles to increase our vibrational frequency. I brought along a little device which I invented, which activates a crystal. It's similar to the work of the Englishman who does electrocrystal therapy. I've forgotten his name right now, but how you activate a crystal with light and magnetic fields, and that can help to raise our vibrational frequency, particularly when the light is pulsed at varying frequencies according to the various organs of the body. For example, the pineal gland or the third eye responds better to 32 hertz. So my devices all contain and scan around 32 hertz, but they can go up and down the frequency spectrum because there are hidden frequencies that are carried on that base alpha or theta frequency.
That was amazing. And you invented that.
Yes, so this will not only activate a crystal, but it will also activate a light pen. I have another one that's got a better battery. So if I plug a light pen or wand into one of these devices, it will reproduce that frequency. This is to illustrate a light pen where the light is not laser, but it's an intense bright light. That's a red one. Now you can also use green or blue. There's a blue one and a red one running simultaneously. So these would be pulsed at the appropriate biological frequencies corresponding to the brain waves. You know that theta wave is around 7 or 8 hertz, and alpha frequencies are around 10 and 12 hertz. So although we want to get into a theta state, which is the state that is used in reincarnation and regression work, generally speaking, we are vibrating at higher frequencies that we have to feed. We have to feed our higher frequencies, feed our soul. Our soul operates and feeds from higher frequencies, and our soul also radiates higher frequencies. That's why when we have 2 or more souls combined, we have an interaction, an interferential benefit of multiple souls interacting positively and synergistically together to give rise to a higher order, so that we pump each other up to higher and higher frequencies. But at the same time, don't forget that we are also feeding the higher dimensions. It's a circular energy cycle. We are fed and we feed. So part of our purpose of being here is not only to learn but to experience. When you go to a concert and listen to music or dance, you're having an experience. That experience in turn is feeding the higher dimensions, is feeding the angels, feeding your higher self, feeding your spirit, because spirit delights in joyful experiences. So anything in life, we should cultivate an attitude of joy, a positive attitude of joy, so that we transmute, say, excitement, for example, into joy and satisfaction, which is a much higher frequency. That's why we have excitement, and excitement can be very addictive. But the other side of excitement is boredom, because excitement doesn't last very long. That's why we have to raise it to a higher vibrational frequency as soon as possible. We've talked about higher dimensions, so it might be worthwhile talking about higher dimensions. That's where the spirit resides. And each of us has a spirit. Each of us is a spirit, which is occupying a physical body. Our spirit only occupies the body to a small fraction of our spiritual capability, because our physical mind and body couldn't tolerate or cope with the burden of that higher frequency spiritual energy. So what we have in us is a small fraction of that soul energy. That's why sometimes it's called fragmented souls, because people feel that they don't have their whole soul or spirit here, and that's true. And this is where I recommend that we raise our vibrations so that we can allow more of our soul energy to occupy this vehicle called the physical mind and body. So there are these other dimensions. First of all, the physical plane, from bottom upwards. We experience things on the physical plane. We touch and we hear and we see light, which is primarily physical. The next level is the etheric level, which is the level at which acupuncture and other healing energy medicines operate. I remember the acronym PEAM: physical, etheric, astral. The next plane is the astral plane, which is at a higher frequency. However, in those planes there reside the potential for illness. So people ask, why is there cancer? Why is there illness? Why do bad things happen to good people? And it seems that in these higher dimensions, particularly the etheric and the astral and the mental plane, there are entities or fragments of intelligent consciousness that are not fully aligned with the higher goodness of the universe, of all that is. So that's sometimes why cancer already pre-exists often in these higher dimensions before it becomes manifest. So preventive yoga or any kind of discipline doesn't have to be yogic postures, but any kind of discipline is yoga. Any time that we do something that's not comfortable, but yet we know it's for our best interest or that of others, that's a yoga, and that raises our vibrational frequency up and up from the etheric to the astral to the mental. So our higher, if we have lower thoughts, bring them up to higher thoughts, and then the next plane above that is the causal or spiritual plane, and we can access the spiritual plane, and it's called theta, the theta healing plane, which is the state of consciousness when people go into regressive hypnotic states for age regression, between life regression, and past life regression. So do we want to move on and talk about past life regression at this point?
I think so. That would be great. Are you comfortable with that?
I think it follows on naturally, and then we have a lot of, just to give you a taster of what we're going to cover. We're going to cover the science behind a lot of this, because I'm primarily a physicist, electrical engineer, a doctor of natural medicine, and I've studied particularly quantum physics, because I think that has a lot of the answers to higher consciousness. So we'll keep that for the second hour. But right now, let's just finish off, if we can, with reincarnation. Now, historically, back in the 1960s, I was a regression therapist. I studied regression to age regression. We thought that was it back then. That was as far as you could get. We go back to childhood, maybe even birth. But in fact, it was called birth. It was called primal therapy. It was called, later it became rebirthing. So that was as far as we thought we could take people, was back to birth. And then some therapists found that people were giving intrauterine primals or regressions to when they were in the womb. And one of my colleagues, Dr. Tom Bernay, wrote a book on that, The Secret Life of the Unborn Child, taking people back to the womb. And then the therapists started having implantation regressions. People would be experiencing the implantation of the sperm into the ovum and the trauma around that. And then many of us started getting past life or in-between life experiences. And one of my colleagues at that time did a lot of work. He wrote this book, Life Between Life, and we should give him credit. He was one of the first to distinguish and write about and take this seriously, the in-between life state, where we have a choice before we move into the next life. We have a schooling, a learning. There is learning in the higher dimensions, and there are groups of angelic beings who guide us and support us and counsel us before we make that step into the choice that we have made for this lifetime. The choice, well, it's not maybe a total choice, that we have a range of possibilities, and we have a choice. Yeah, no, I don't like these parents. I prefer these parents. So we have a preference out of a limited range of possibilities in between lives. So after this book by Dr. Whidden, there was the great work by Michael Newton, whose writings really influenced me back. I hope you can see the title here. Michael Newton's book, Life Between Lives, Journey of Souls. So that was a very helpful book. It helped tell us that we are pointed in the right direction and to look more deeply in those directions of between lives, rather than just repetitive life after life where you die and are reborn. We want to know what's going on in between life, because that is where a lot of the secrets of the higher dimensions, the cosmic secrets, are revealed. So that was Michael Newton, and he has a good going school now you can find on the internet. Additionally, there was Brian Weiss, who also has made some great contributions. So we have to point you in that direction. This is very important reading, all these books that I'm showing you. Out of hundreds of books, I brought along about 20 that I think are pivotal for all of us to study, maybe over and over again, to really understand what the teachings are.
I'm going to mention to you, I'm just going to interrupt for 1 second. Brian Weiss, Many Lives, Many Masters, he actually has a breakdown of that on YouTube, and it is on our website, www.askyourangels.ca. The whole thing is there from 1 to 12. So you can go on there. If you don't have time to read and you want to just see the YouTube video, you can do that too.
Yeah, and people who want regression sessions, and probably everyone should have at some point in their lives, go on and get some referrals, because many of the students of these schools are all over the world now. Particularly, this is the other one I wanted to share with you, Dolores Cannon, and her. She's been working on this field since back in the 70s, 80s, and this is only one of a 3-volume set. So her work is outstanding and really mind-boggling, what people have come up with. Now, this particular little book, out of all of her books, this is the one I've been reading most recently, and it's her encounter with a young man called Philip. And Philip, fortunately, turns out to be an electrical engineer. So he was able to understand a lot of the technology in the flying crafts and the UFOs and in the civilizations that he came from. But because of his background in electronics and science, he was able to give us a more succinct, clear, scientific description. For example, drawings of an anti-gravity device, how crystals are cut, because much of their energy is based on light, and how it's transferred through crystals to create anti-gravity and healing and to power their civilization. So this is one that definitely, Keepers of the Garden by Dolores Cannon, I'd recommend you read. Now, for some of you who are not, you haven't done much reading, I would say don't dive in at the deep end, because it can be very confusing. You have a lot of resistance about some of the bizarre experiences that people report. And they're not just anecdotal again. They are reports that time after time client after client after client is repeating the same stories about what happens in between life. So there's corroboration, verification, not just one person. So that was about, what do we want to cover about reincarnation?
Well, I did want to ask about the soul, individual souls, group souls, advanced souls. I think we covered some of that. Animals, some people want to know. I believe they do have souls, but...
Yes, they do, but the animal consciousness, the animal mind body is not a sufficient vehicle for for a spirit to enter in, even 20%. You might get a small, like 5 or 10% of that spirit entity in an animal. Yes, there's no doubt that animals have souls and have a spiritual connection. In fact, through some of the reading, you'll discover that even rocks have a spirit. A spirit can inhabit a rock. Some of the early spirit experiences, when they're starting off in the physical, they've never had a physical experience. They start off with something fairly easy to handle, like something that doesn't move much, a rock or a tree, or just energy. Some of the spirits manifest or occupy only an energy form, a wispy, energetic fragment of consciousness. Now,
there's been talk too that plants have souls.
Plants, yes, and when if rocks can have souls, but when you say have souls, the souls use them as a vehicle to some small extent, but that soul could be simultaneously in other vehicles, multiple vehicles, and there are stories of a spirit being in more than one person, 2 or more people simultaneously. So there's an enormous range of possibilities, unlimited it would appear, a range of possibilities.
That kind of takes me to my next question: is can souls, like, sometimes when we go to sleep and we dream of another life, and sometimes I think it's a past life, but is it possible that we are somehow splitting or living another life on another parallel?
Well, yes. When we sometimes have regression, sometimes these regressive experiences are rupturing through. They're waiting to be like ripe fruit. They're waiting to be experienced. They're waiting to fall from the tree. So some people have spontaneous regressions. We call them crazy, and they get taken to the hospital and they get pumped with drugs. But many are having a healthy regressive experience that they maybe should have had years ago, with the proper care, with a good therapist who can guide them. But it is important to be guided through, so that you get reassurance and loving comfort to support you through this regressive experience, rather than having it burst upon you and not knowing, and with the fear of those around you and the misunderstandings. So it's quite and in dreams that can happen, of course, too. Now, one thing, a point to bring up, sometimes these experiences, even in regression, are not true past lives. They're often what's called imprints, because there have been cases where a spiritual being, an entity, has come here for the first time on Earth, but they have a memory of other life experiences. These sometimes are just implants or imprints to give them to give them a body of comfort and experience behind them. They may not have actually been real. So when you ask them later on, was that a supposed memory, was that real? And they say, no, that was an imprint. That was given to me as part of my supportive programming. It's probably the best way of putting it, supportive programming, so that they can handle the stresses of everyday life. Because some people can't handle some of us humans cannot handle life the way it is. That's why there's a lot of suicides, because people are not comfortable with their soul and their soul purpose. Such people really should go for, to have soul analysis. They should go for regressive analysis to explore why is this, what is happening, so that they can come to terms with and be comfortable with their soul purpose.
I've had a couple of clients in the last month two people that have connected with me. Obviously, I will not say their names, but that are incredibly unhappy, and they've had either suicide attempt or thoughts of suicide, and it's the same thing. I've suggested that they try to get a regression. It's important to find out why, because I think for something like that, it goes very deep. I think the reason, there could be something so deep that it's the only way that it's going to help you.
Yeah, I totally agree. There are, all of these different therapies. I've studied most of them, including Jungian therapy. He was one of the closest. Carl Jung, who was the one who came up with the idea of the collective unconscious, and he did some regressive work too. He broke with Sigmund Freud to start his own school because Freud was more physically based. So even with all of these great therapies, none of them work as well as in-depth regression. And in regression, the truth and the information is coming directly from the person. What better source is there than the person themselves to go back? And we can do that rather than going to a psychic who tells you about you. How can someone tell you about you better than you can tell yourself about you? In fact, on the topic of psychics, studies have been done. If you read the book Vibrational Medicine, this is the great Bible of energy medicine. It was the text of my course that I taught on energy medicine. Many of the great psychics, including Oster Escabani and others, have been tested to see what is the level of their accuracy, using double-blind studies, numbers in an envelope, shuffling them so that no one knows. And they've found that 80% accuracy was the highest that some of these world-famous psychics got. So 80% accurate means 20% wrong. Mm-hmm. So, would you get on a plane that only that had only an 80% chance of landing safely? So I think the truth really resides within ourselves and within our own relationship with our higher self, with our spirit. That's why before you go for regression, build yourself up, nourish yourself psycho-spiritually through all of the delight in the music, all of the delights of life that can raise your vibrational frequency so that you can get a better connection with your higher self, your soul.